So what are the key compliance controls that organizations should focus on while handling this sensitive Aadhaar data?
So in terms of key compliance controls, I think the best reference point for any organization, of course, is the ADV guidelines. What the guidelines dictate is fairly straightforward and clear. But when we talk about compliance for Aadhaar data, it is important to understand that UIDAI is not just asking organizations to encrypt this data. The objective for Aadhaar Data Vault is to reduce the overall risk that is associated with handling of the Aadhaar numbers. So the latest guidelines, they emphasize on a combination of, say, architectural or technical and operational controls, rather than just relying on a single security mechanism, that is encryption. So most important is obviously data minimization. So organizations need to avoid storing Aadhaar numbers whenever they're not absolutely required. So the whole purpose of Aadhaar Data Vault is itself, say, limited. It is limiting the purpose of having Aadhaar Data Vault. If you don't need to store the number, don't store the number. That is the first guideline. Then the second key control is, of course, the architecture of the vault. Rather than allowing any business or application to store and process Aadhaar numbers directly, actually the Aadhaar number should be tokenized, and only a reference token needs to be utilized within the applications. So that is another key compliance that needs to be looked after. And then third is also utilizing very, very strong techniques of encryption and the way in which this reference token gets generated. So that is also important, that you utilize best practices, you utilize the latest controls, that is AES-256 as of now for encryption, that is standard for generating the reference tokens. Also, it needs to not just be hashing of the Aadhaar numbers, but you need to use some kind of a tokenization method or technique to generate it. The tokens need to be of a certain specific type or standard. And then, of course, when we talk about, say, tokenization or encryption, then we cannot ignore the topic of reference keys. We cannot ignore the topic of actual encryption key, how the keys are managed. So this key management and storage also needs to be done through with the help of hardware-backed security. So again, ADV guidelines are very, very clear on this. It is, I think, more clear than most compliances that you need to have a FIPS 142 level 3 certified HSM. Currently, the standard obviously is FIPS 143 level 3. So it is obviously, it says FIPS 142 level 3 or higher. So any HSM that is at least FIPS 142 level 3 compliant is mandatory or is mandated by the compliance. We use that HSM as the hardware-backed security mechanism to store the keys. So these are all the key, say, compliance controls organizations must not skip whenever they want to implement Aadhaar Data Vault.